Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we talk about issues affecting veterans after they get out of the military. Before we get started, I'd like to ask a favor. If you haven't done so already, please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts. If you've already done that, thank you. These ratings help the show get discovered so it can reach a wider audience. And while you're there, click the subscribe button so that you get notified of new episodes as soon as they come out. If you don't use Apple Podcasts, you can visit driveonpodcast.com/subscribe to find other ways of subscribing, including our email list. I'm your host, Scott DeLuzio, and now, let's get on with the show. Hey, everyone. Today, my guest is John Strickland, who is a franchisee of Vitanya Brain Performance Center in El Paso, Texas. He's a 23-year Army veteran who served in Vietnam and afterwards suffered from PTSD. He's here to talk about his background in the Army, his journey finding treatment for PTSD, and how Vitanya has helped him through that journey. So, John, welcome to the show. Why don't you give us a little information about your background and your time in Vietnam and things like that?
Well, thank you for having me, Scott. It's a pleasure to be with you. I joined the Army in 1965 after 1 year of college. So you can do the math. I'm not a spring chicken. I served 3 years in artillery, including a year in Vietnam. And during that first tour in Vietnam, I met some helicopter pilots. At that time, they needed a lot of helicopter pilots. So I applied for flight school while in Vietnam.
Oh, wow.
Knowing that I would come back to the States, go to flight school, and go back to Vietnam. I spent almost 3 years at Fort Sill before that tour in Vietnam. And then a year at Fort Sill as a drill instructor, a platform instructor at the advanced training for artillery, awaiting on my application for flight school. So I went to flight school and graduated high enough in my class that I was offered advanced helicopters. So I accepted that, and here's the reason. I could fly Cobra helicopters. Well, I'd already been in Vietnam for a year. Hueys land out in the middle of the jungle. Cobras land where there's fuel and ammunition. We had air superiority.
Right.
And my wife was pregnant. Well, that kept me in the States for 3 more months. So I went to Vietnam as a helicopter pilot, supporting long-range reconnaissance patrols. Now, anytime we were based at the same base, so we had a lot of camaraderie. We met with one another, and they would always talk about, boy, how we love those helicopter pilots. They didn't realize that they were so high on my list of people to admire. Can you imagine a 6 or 7 man team going out looking for the enemy, and when they find them, they know that they're outnumbered? It was just amazing to me. So when you call troops in contact, we're airborne within 2 minutes. That was our goal. Mm-hmm. And we're out there to help them. So I had a lot of admiration for the people that we were helping.
So when you started off as artillery when you were first in Vietnam, and then you decided to apply for flight school while you're in Vietnam and go learn how to fly helicopters. What made you decide to go about that transition? What made you want to get into flying helicopters?
Well, I had considered taking pilot lessons before I even joined the Army.
Okay.
I was just excited about being able to fly, and gee, I could stay in the Army and make a career out of flying helicopters. That seemed like a pretty good deal to me.
I mean, it seems like it's pretty much every kid's dream growing up is to, fly planes. You see planes and helicopters and things like that flying overhead, and it's like, it's either that or you want to be an astronaut or something. You know what I mean? As a kid growing up, and you see these things flying around. It's like, wow, I would love to do that. And I know myself when I was a kid, we grew up, we'd watch movies, with fighter pilots and helicopter pilots and things like that. And my brother and I, we'd jump on the couch and we'd pretend like we're flying in the planes or in the helicopters, whatever. And then when we crash landed, we'd land into a pile of pillows on the floor or whatever. And so it's kind of like the dream come true is you're basically getting paid to learn how to fly these things, and then turning that into a career in the Army. And then you continued to fly helicopters after the Army. Is that correct?
Yes, I did. I flew in the Gulf of Mexico for the oil and gas industry for about 11 years.
Okay.
And the company that I was flying for bought an aeromedical company in Phoenix. And there was an opening there. So instead of being gone for 7 days at a time, I could work the same kind of schedule, 7 days on, 7 days off, but I'd be home every day. So when I mentioned that to my wife, she said, yeah, let's move to Phoenix. We didn't know how hot it was.
Yeah. Well, yeah, they don't put that in the sales pitch to get you into that job. How you're basically living on the surface of the sun here, because I'm in the Phoenix area myself, for people who might be listening and don't know that. And right now, today it's forecasted to be about 116 degrees. This is in mid-August, so it feels like you're living on the surface of the sun at times, but thank God for air conditioning and cold water to keep us cool. But so you got out of the military and you transitioned into this civilian job, flying helicopters, which is, I think is awesome that you're able to use the training that you got in the military to be able to continue on a civilian career and continue doing the thing that you enjoyed doing, even after you got out of the military. A lot of times people get out of the military and their job isn't necessarily translatable to the civilian world. An infantryman, for example, there's not too many, infantry type jobs or, things like that. I mean, you can translate some of the skills into security and law enforcement and things like that, but, you're not going to be doing the same exact type of job necessarily when you get out of the military. But you had some struggles during your time in the military and after getting out. What would you mind talking a little bit about that and what you experienced and what that caused afterwards after you got out of the military?
Yes, I can, but I'd like to address one point that you brought up there. There's one word that covers my career, and that's service.
Okay.
I always saw myself in a service role. You're helping someone else. So that's especially ending up flying aeromedical helicopters. You're
for sure. Yeah.
You didn't cause the accident. You're there to help them, get them to a trauma center. But to your question, I'm going to back up to the last 3 years of my military career. Although I was an attack helicopter pilot, I fell in love with flying by reference to instruments, but Cobras don't do that. So my primary job was to fly Cobras, but the job I really loved was flying Hueys by reference to instruments. And I became an examiner, testing all the other pilots on their abilities to do that. So by the time it was, I was a CW4 with 20 years experience, and my wife wanted to go back to Germany one more time before we retired. And I said, I don't want to do that. The Army is going to send me to a school that I don't want to go to. Well, that's where the PTSD began to manifest. They forced me to go to Cobra school because I wasn't qualified to fly any Cobras in the inventory. And when we got to the gunnery session, I spent 3 days without sleeping. I was having flashbacks, nightmare. It was terrible. Now, my generation was told, do your job, just suck it up.
Right.
So I didn't go on sick call, but looking back on it after the fact, if I'd gone to the flight surgeon and said, these are the problems I'm having, he would have taken me out of that course. I would have gone to Germany and flown Hueys and been very happy. Instead, I was the worst soldier in the unit. I was so angry. And the unit that I flew with in Vietnam has a reunion every year. And I didn't know it, but the battalion commander, who I was the primary pilot for when we went to the field, was also in the same unit. So he retired as a bird colonel, and I'm sitting across the a banquet table at one of these reunions and said, Dave, you know that officer efficiency report you gave me when I retired? And he nodded. I said, that was the worst report I got in my career. And then I added, and I deserved it. So I recognized I was a terrible. He asked me to influence the young pilots right out of flight school. Oh, I influenced them all right.
Just not in the right direction.
In a negative way.
Yeah.
So that was where the anger was really manifested that culminated in me diagnosed with severe PTSD. It wasn't so much the flashbacks from the war. It was because I was forced to do something that I didn't want to do that brought those reflections from earlier years back. But going through that gunnery, the 3 days of gunnery, firing live ammunition, and it was just terrible.
Yeah, and things like that can bring you back, if you will, to those bad times where there were things that happened that sometimes you might just rather forget, had happened.
That's right.
And that can bring you back to that, and it could be something, in this case you were firing live ammunition and things like that, and so there was the noise and there was the sights and things like that, and so that, and probably the smell of the gunpowder, I don't know exactly what it was that brought you back there, but all of that stuff combined can create those triggers. All of our senses, the sense of taste and smell and sight and hearing, all of those things can trigger memories. I was just talking with my wife the other day. She was cutting up some vegetables for dinner, and some peppers, and just the smell of that, I said to her, I feel like I'm standing in my grandfather's garden that he had when I was growing up as a kid, because he grew peppers in the garden, and just that sense of smell brought me back there, and that was a happy time. It was a good time.
That's a good memory.
Had good memories, and I was like, this was, keep cutting those, so that's good. But the same thing can happen on the negative side too, where you experience some trauma, some other issues that might have gone on during your time in Vietnam, and then you go and you have those same senses coming back to you, and it takes you right back there. And I'm sure you're not alone in that. And
that's why I tell that story.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And that's why I do this podcast too. And that's why I want people to know that they're not alone if they're experiencing this type of stuff. They're not crazy or anything else like that. It's a normal human reaction, and if anything, they're normal for being able to experience these types of things. So how long did you go before you were actually diagnosed with PTSD?
It wasn't too long after I retired. I reconnected with a Vietnam veteran flight nurse that I'd flown with 10 years prior, and learned that he had liver cancer. Well, I'd recently retired. I had plenty of time. He could no longer drive. So I started taking him to his VA appointments, waiting a liver transplant. In 2014, he died prior to a liver becoming available. That sent me into a spiral of depression. I got to the point that I was thinking of hurting myself. And I said, no, I can't. I got to get some help. So I went to the VA, and I remember the interview. I walked into the mental health clinic. They took me into a room, and a young lady sat down and asked me 6 questions. And I answered yes to all 6 of them, and was crying by the time I answered the last question. And she looked at me and said, I understand. We can help you. Oh, there is help. There's hope. So that's when I was diagnosed with severe PTSD.
Yeah. And, just to kind of a side note here, I'm glad that you shared that story about going, to the VA and getting the mental health facility and getting the treatment, because it does take some courage to admit that you have something wrong, right? You're not Superman, that there's something, not right. And you do need to go and get that worked on or checked out by someone who knows what they're doing. And there are lots of good people who do work at the VA and other facilities too, that do this type of work, and they can help. If you give it a chance, I think that's the important thing. So you went through, and so I'm imagining you went through the process of getting the mental health treatment through the VA for a period of time. How did that look for you? What was that process like?
I did the counseling. I took their medications, and I got to the point that I wasn't going to hurt myself. But then I was reflecting, and I asked myself the question, is this as good as it gets? Because there are still issues there. And that's when I found Vitanya. I saw a video of how this technology helped an Afghan war veteran. And that was funded by a nonprofit associated with Vitanya called Heal the Hero Foundation. And this video was so impressive. And the video is available on Heal the Hero Foundation's YouTube channel. So I'm not going to tell her whole story, but that is my inspiration. I told my wife, I'm coming out of retirement. This can help so many people. I've got to do this.
Great. So what is it about what you do and how it works, and what's the process like?
I'm going to give you a quick story about the whole process.
Okay.
Vitanya is on the leading edge of neuroscience. We capitalize on advances in brain science by using software and advanced technologies to balance the brain. We're non-medical, non-intrusive, and we don't use pharmaceuticals. We are not talk therapy. We're using technology. The first advance we capitalize on is galvanic skin response. That's the technology of an EKG, EEG, or polygraph. That technology has advanced to the point now that we can read the electrical signals the brain is sending through the skin. So by placing your hand on a device that has sensors on it, that connects our technology to your brain.
Okay.
The second advance we're capitalizing on is the fact that we can now ask the brain questions. It's called biocommunications. So let me use anxiety as an example. Someone comes to us and I access our software and tell it we're investigating anxiety. Well, through that device that the person has their hands on with the sensors on it, the technology asks the person's brain, search yourself and find the electrical signals you're sending concerning anxiety. And the brain does. In that process, it determines what is your normal range for this session. And it reports to us the electrical signals it's sending that's outside that normal range. We call those imbalances. The next step is, through the technology, we ask the brain, well, search yourself and find the electrical signals that will bring those imbalances back within your normal range. And the brain does. Finally, we're going to ask the brain, send those signals instead of what you've been sending. We're rebooting the brain like a computer, giving it a new normal.
Interesting. Okay.
Anxiety is going to be greatly reduced or eliminated. I've had people at the end of one session take a deep breath and say, wow, I feel so peaceful. Well, yeah, now, your brain just corrected the issues.
Yeah. And now, is this a system where it's, you use the example of a computer. So, if you have a problem with the computer, you reboot it, or you install something, or you do something to it, and then it's fixed, and it continues operating, normally, until it doesn't. And then you might need to go reboot it again, or you might need to do something else to it. Is it sort of a similar process where you are fixing whatever the issue is? Maybe it's anxiety or whatever the case may be. You're going and fixing the issue with the individual. Is it more of a permanent solution, or is it something that needs some tweaking over time?
A prospective client will ask me, how long is this going to take? And my answer is, I can't answer that. You're going to tell me when you reached your wellness goal. So I have long-term clients, and I have clients that were with us for a few months, and they said, I've reached my goal. I'm not coming back anymore. Well,
Okay.
congratulations. The door's open if you find a need to come back.
Sure. Okay. So I guess the answer is like anything, it varies, and you know, um,
Well, let me give you our legal disclaimer. That'll answer that question.
that'll answer it, I'm
We
sure.
do not claim to heal, treat, cure, diagnose, or prescribe. Those
Sure.
are medical terms. We don't use those.
Right. Okay. So in that case, you know, it seems like it's something that somebody needs to experience it for themselves to see, you know, is this really something that's going to work for me? You know, and go through the process, um, and see how that uh, affects them, and if whether or not that's going to be something that they choose to continue with, you know, for their own personal well-being. Um, Now, you know, in your situation, you know, you went through this process. What was it? What was it like for you? And like, what happened when you first? So you heard the story about you know, the Afghan war veteran who went through this process, and then you decided to give it a shot. What was the process like for you, and how did that look?
Before we opened our center, I'd already decided I was going to be a franchisee. So, but before we opened the center, I tested myself using the technologies. And when I mentioned anxiety previously, in our technology, we call this a panel. There are over 22,000 panels in the software. I tested myself for post-traumatic stress. That's the only panel I looked at. It identified 47 biomarkers that were out of balance. Panic disorders, depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, you know, post-traumatic stress. But in that first session, the technology in my brain found the solutions to all 47 of those items. I sent those solutions to my brain for 6 weeks, and I felt so different that I retested myself. The technology showed nothing out of balance concerning post-traumatic stress.
Okay, interesting.
I don't use the word cure, but my post-traumatic stress is very well managed.
No, that makes sense. That it isn't necessarily cured, and I think that goes back to the question that I had before. It's not necessarily cured, but it's managed, and you know, there
Yes.
could be things that happen in the future where, you know, like I was saying before, with the senses, that could come back and trigger something, you know, a memory or whatever that brings some of this stuff back up. But on a day-to-day basis, you're managing it well enough that it's not affecting your day-to-day life. It
Well,
seems like.
let me make another point. You know, trauma is just not occurring to soldiers and first responders.
Correct.
If someone's in a car accident, they can experience trauma.
Sure.
So I'm one of the long-term clients I mentioned.
Yeah, and that's you know, a testament to it too. You know, you put your money where your mouth is and open up the franchise, and you know, you're helping people with the technology to get through this, whether they're military, first responders, or, you know, people like you said, someone in a car accident, or who was you know, involved in some other sort of crime or something like that. They were robbed, or, you know, whatever the case may be. They're going to suffer from some mental you know, anguish and things like that as well. So that's
Well, we
that's
could talk
interesting.
about the pandemic in relation to this as well.
Certainly, certainly
There,
with regards to anxiety and things like that, I can imagine that's a big thing.
there's an organization called Mental Health America that does free scanning online, or screening, excuse me, free screening. They've been doing this for 6 years. And as of June 2020, over 169,000 additional participants reported having moderate to severe depression or anxiety, compared with participants who completed the screening prior to the pandemic. Now, that's a very small sample. You know, how many people go online looking for screenings for depression or anxiety?
Right.
And there's 169,000 additional people. So
It's a significant bump. Yeah. So
mental health in America is a very important topic right now.
it certainly is. Yeah. Going back to veterans. So what other situations have you seen veterans come in with? Obviously PTSD is a big thing. Um, you know, I want to go back to what we were saying before about kind of sharing your story and and things like that, and showing that it's okay to share that type of thing. I want to maybe highlight some examples of situations where this technology has helped other veterans who've maybe come through your office and gotten the assistance that they needed. And maybe if you can share some examples, obviously without divulging too many personal details of the individuals, so that way someone else might hear this message and resonate with it and say, yeah, that's something I'm going through, and maybe this is something that can help me too.
Well, I believe instead of me taking the time and giving those examples, I would direct people to our YouTube channels.
Okay.
Heal the Hero Foundation on YouTube is the one that will have the veterans, the first responders stories. And you will see 5-minute videos there that are just very impressive. And that's really what got me doing what I'm doing. So yes, I've had successes in our center, but it's better if you can connect a face and hear the story from the person.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll put a link to the Heal the Hero Foundation and their YouTube channel in the show notes for this episode. So anyone who's listening to this, I'll pull that up and put that in the show notes, so you can just click over to that relatively easily.
Now, the YouTube channel for Vitanya Brain Performance Center has videos more along the civilian sector and children that are suffering from ADD, ADHD, and autism, those kind of things, which is a very large client segment for us. But the two YouTube channels are kind of separated that way. Veterans are going to want to see the Heal the Hero Foundation videos. Absolutely,
yeah. And I'll have links to all of this stuff in the show notes, including links to Vitanya's website, so you can look up the location, see if there's a location near you that you might be able to check out, and see if it's something that is right for you. Ultimately that's a personal decision. You're gonna have to research it, do the due diligence on your own to see whether or not this is a program that you think will help you. Give it a try. Like anything, if you don't try it, you'll never really know. But I suppose you can look into the details of it and take a look to see if that's something that you want to try out.
One question they may have is, can you explain the science behind what you're doing?
Okay. Yeah, and that would be
and I'm not going. Yeah. I'm not going to attempt to do that, but I'm going to tell people how they can find it.
Okay.
Our clinical director is Stacy Smith. If you'll go to our company website, vitanya.com, and click on the link Focus Areas, then Mental Health, and there's a place to get future notifications for the talks that he does. And if you're working in the mental health field, you can get continuing education credits for watching his presentations. He will explain the science behind it much more effectively than I can. In fact, I've been asked not to attempt it.
Okay.
Dr. Stacy Smith is our National Clinical Director at Vitanya.
Okay. Anything else that you want to tell people about Vitanya and what you do and how it works, or anything else that maybe we didn't touch on yet that you might want to talk about?
Yes, there is. I'm located in El Paso, Texas, but we have 19 centers in 8 states. So you can find those locations at vitanya.com, of course. But an exciting thing is that we have remote capabilities. That device that I told you about, if you had that in your office, we could instruct you how to download our software on your computer, and we could connect like we are on this Zoom meeting, and we could complete a remote session. I have clients across America. 50% of my clients are remote clients. I have clients in Washington State and New Hampshire. and in between. So this is not something that you need to be fearful of. Oh, well, I look it up and it's the closest franchise is 4 hours away. I can't do that. We can do this remotely. I'm
And
helping my son-in-law, who's a Gulf War veteran, and he lives in Illinois.
Oh, okay. And this is probably a great thing too for, especially this time during the pandemic and everything,
Mhm.
where people may just not want to go into an office where there's other people, unnecessarily getting exposed to, other people who may or may not be sick. And so that, talking about, anxiety and things like that certainly would add to it if they had to go in and do that as well. So, being able to do that from the comfort of your home where you're maybe more likely to be at a normal baseline level of your mental health is probably a better option for a lot of people too.
Well,
So that's good. If there's no center nearby where you happen to live, the remote option is always there as well. So that works.
for that reason, I have 2 clients in El Paso that are remote clients. They just
There you go. Yeah,
they don't want to come into the office. Um,
sure.
People can learn more about us if they're members of the VFW. There was a one-page article about our company in the June-July 2020 issue on
Oh,
page
okay.
53, and it talks about our remote capabilities. We did
Wonderful.
a pilot study with veterans in a community college somewhere up north, I forget the state, and it was very successful. There's 2 things that we've accomplished in the El Paso market that we're the only ones in the company that have accomplished this. We are now VA community care partners.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
a veteran can use our services and we can bill the VA for it. So even if you're remote, connect with me and I can teach you, I'll give you the information you need to get to your primary care doctor, to get a referral to us, and you can become a remote client and we can bill the VA for it.
Oh, that's outstanding too, for all the people who, might be struggling with getting appointments through the VA or things just
Yes.
don't seem to be working out with maybe the provider that they're working with. Give this a shot, and it
That's
doesn't really cost you anything if it's going through the VA
right.
if you're eligible for that.
That's been about 18 months in the work, but I finally have the written agreement in hand.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
we're just now starting this.
Good.
And one other point, we're all, because we're approved through the VA now, we're also being credentialed for other insurances. So that's a big thing for a company like ours to be able to accept insurance.
Sure.
And we're working in that direction.
Wonderful. Well, John, it has been a pleasure speaking to you about all of the technology that Vitanya has available and the things that it's done and your time in Vietnam and your service, which, we're all very thankful for that service as well. And like you said, you've continued serving throughout your life. So, service is definitely a good word that I think you can be proud of using to describe your career and your life. So that's definitely hats off and thank you for that.
Thank you. Can I end on a light note?
Yeah, sure.
Would you like to know how a good conduct medal was taken back?
Go ahead. Yeah, let's hear it.
Okay, I was enlisted before I went to flight school, and I was awarded a good conduct medal. And at the end of flight school, I got a paper. They just handed it out in a formation, and it's the award of a good conduct medal. Well, knowing that it should have been the second award, I went to personnel and said, this should be the second award of a good conduct medal. And they said, oh, we're not authorized to award the second award. And they revoked my good conduct medal.
So trying to straighten out the records ended up
Yeah.
dropping one of those for you. So, yeah, the Army is good with messing up paperwork. So, Well, thank you for sharing that story and the other stories. And like I said, it's been a pleasure speaking with you and talking about all of what Vitanya has to offer. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Scott, and thank you for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com, or on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Drive On Podcast.